stuff. And so, yeah, he's in his own personal hell and has been for a number of years. That's why he looks like shit, because he feels like what people think about him. And he fed off of that, off of, being the good guy. And knowing that about him, was one of the reasons why I was able to get him to, pay the Ragomez's back at least some of their money, because I presented it in a way that, was a positive for everybody, because I knew that's how Tom, operates. But yeah, to answer your question about, is it justice? Yes, it is. Just to be convicted, finally, after manipulating so many systems and people and power to stay out of trouble, just the conviction in and of itself is certainly justice for the victims. And it sets a precedent for other people who might try to do this kind of thing. And it lays the groundwork, solid groundwork, to take a serious look at the people and companies that helped Tom Girardi do this, instead of looking the other way, acting like, well, there hasn't been a conviction. It's really hard to convince people that his partners in crime are criminals when we haven't convicted the main dude yet. So take him down. Right now it's all up to the prosecutors. Like, they either execute and do their job. They're either better lawyers than the public defenders, or they're not. I mean, we can use the OJ trial as a good example. It comes down to the lawyers, not always the facts. What lawyers are better lawyers? And my daughter, who's a theater major, hates when I say this, but a courtroom is the biggest theater there is. I just sat in the courtroom for the Jerry Jones breach of contract trial with his daughter. And when we saw the mom get off the stand and embrace Jerry Jones for what felt like at least a minute long in the courtroom in front of everybody but the jury, you couldn't even make that moment up if you tried. I mean, and in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly why I say the courtroom is the biggest theater, or like movie set you could be on. In federal court, there are no cameras. There will be no cameras in the courtroom with Tom. There'll be courtroom artists likely that will be there, but seeing it for yourself is a whole different thing. And, I think that Tom's trial will probably, have its moments as well. I don't know though, that seeing that hug in the courtroom, I'm not sure I'll ever see something like that quite again, but it wouldn't surprise me for there to be a crazy moment in Tom's trial.
I would agree. And as we wind down and wrap up, you have said to me, I think on the last time we talked, you and I talk off air all the time, you've said this, like, now that you have your podcast, this podcast, Victim in Plain Sight, Tom Girardi, like, do the victims feel somewhat hurt? Because that's like a common theme that we've talked about on this podcast last time and off air, like that they don't feel heard. Now that you have this podcast, it is doing well on the charts. People are listening. Like, do they feel somewhat heard? Like, does that help?
We had a listening party at the same restaurant where Erika met the victims. The Valley Inn restaurant and bar in Sherman Oaks. They've been awesome to the victims. And so Danny Barnes, who I mentioned before, who was the Lockheed employee that became a Girardi Keese client, and then Joe C. Hernandez, they're both in the podcast. They came to the listening party, and it was powerful to listen to it with them. And when Danny told me that we get an A++, I mean, that's all I really needed to hear. I wasn't really worried about any charting or anything like that. To have somebody who's been fighting 30 years feel like he was heard, I mean, that's huge. I mean, to me, that was one of the most important moments sort of in this whole progression, is that, to hear the victims say, we feel like we've been represented and we've been heard. That's what they came to Tom for.
Yeah. So that's got to make you feel good and kind of full circle.
Yeah. And of course, also makes me want to make sure we keep focusing on them and keep giving them, that sort of voice and evening, the difference between, Erika's got a huge platform, and, it's really hard for the victims to be heard when, she's going to have paparazzi following her around. So anything we can do to make them feel like they're not being ignored or ghosted, I'm going to keep doing my best, to do that. And I think that they deserve it for sure.
Well, you'll come back on here. You and you're going to come back in person when I'm in LA. We're going to have a drink. I'm sorry I wasn't at the watch party because I'm on the wrong coast at the moment. Where can everyone find you? Is there anything else you want to say to wrap up? And like, where can everyone find you and listen to your podcast?
So you can find our podcast, Predator in Plain Sight. You can find that on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all the places that you find podcasts. And I'm either my name, Kimberly Archie, or Cheer Safety, which goes back to my cheerleading safety foundation. I'm on all the socials.
Thank you for talking. Sorry you went over.
It's okay. I always feel like, oh my God. And I'm thinking
No.
half the time, did I really just fucking say that?
As I was preparing, I'm like, I think this might be a two-part episode because I knew you and I were going to talk about a lot and I had a lot to ask you. So, but I think it's a good refresher. I mean, look, everyone, even with me, the facts just get jumbled. And when you don't focus on this every day like you do, there's only so many hours in the day. You can't read
Yeah,
every word.
there's other things in the headlines, and we've got this huge election. But I think I said enough stuff that
Yeah.
I said before, like about the trial, things that just happened on Friday, the
I've
thing
learned
about
stuff.
Erica and the American Express. I've known that a while, and I haven't said it publicly, so that'll probably catch. And that's Jim Wilkes, the dude paying for her. Okay, that's who told me that he put her on his Amex that he's had for like 30 years, whatever. And when they realized it was Erika Girardi, they canceled it and said no,
Oh,
her
wow.
not having an American Express.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so so there's some new little tidbits in there, but yeah, thank you for having me on, of course, and let me know when you come back to LA. Are you going to be here at all during the trial? Or are you going to try to come one day or
Well,
something?
I think I have to be there in August in general at some point. So I was kind of waiting to see when I had to be there in August to only come once. So maybe like it starts on the 6th. So I mean, chances are if it's 12 days, I will be there during it. If that's the case, I'll definitely go with you.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully I'm going to be there. I don't know. It's been back and forth. Like, I didn't find out till a couple of months ago that they really wanted me to testify. And so then, okay, I'm testifying. All right. Well, I'd already agreed to do the podcast. I'd already signed the contracts. So it was what it was. If I didn't known I was going to testify, I wouldn't have done the podcast.